Step 5, we admit it to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. The 5th step is the key to freedom, the NA Big Book says, and indeed it is. In recovery, one of the things that we learn early on is how, H-O-W. What is required to recover is to be honest, open-minded, and willing, H-O-W. Honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. That's what it takes to recover. Anyone can recover. We began and we will end with that. Recovery is possible. The NA Big Book says if we are not honest when we take a 5th step, we will have the same negative results that dishonesty brought us in the past. Because to live in active addiction is to be dishonest. To live in active addiction is to be a liar, a thief, a con artist. And it doesn't matter whether the addiction is to heroin or crack or pills or booze or gambling or compulsive spending or whatever it is. To live in active addiction is to live in deception. And so one of the things that I get to learn as a recovering person is how to be honest. And it isn't all that easy. I mean, I thought of myself as being an honest person, and I came to learn that that was what's called cash register honesty, which means that, back in the days when I actually used cash, if the cashier gave me too much change back, accidentally gave me 2 5s instead of 1, I would let her know because I didn't want her drawer to be short at the end of the day, and have that come out of her pay or have her get in trouble. So I would give it back. If you were walking down the street in front of me and a $20 bill flew out of your pocket onto the ground in front of me, I would pick it up and catch you and give it back to you. Even in my addiction, I would do those things. So I thought I was an honest person. I could look at that, point at that and say, see, I'm an honest person. Meanwhile, I was lying, stealing, deceiving, robbing on a regular basis. And some of it was subtle and some of it wasn't. And so in the 5th step, after all that work, that fearless and thorough moral inventory, it's not finished until we tell somebody. So we admit to God, we admit to ourselves, and we admit to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. So we'll unpack that in a minute using the NA Big Book as our guide. But I want to talk a little bit about this notion of confession, because that's what we're doing here. And as I said in the last session, you do not have to be a religious person in order to recover. You don't have to sign on to any of the traditional faith traditions in order to get sober and clean, in order to recover. You do not. There are many people who are not religious. They are atheists, they are agnostic, they are secular, they are humanist, whatever language you want to use. They don't buy into this religion stuff. And so some people bump up against this confession thing because they know what it is. And they think, I don't know about that. Because for a lot of people, confession conjures up images of a dark wooden booth and whispering our sins to a priest through a screen. But the truth is that confession, according to psychologists, is really just an expression of remorse about the past and hope for the future. An expression of remorse about the past and hope for the future. It's the process of telling our story. I'm a big fan of Toni Morrison, and this is not conference-approved literature, but Toni Morrison has helped me in a lot of ways to understand life. And what she says is that narrative is important. Story is important. She says it this way: it is words that enable us to make some sense of our existence by allowing us to stand aside and narrate it. Regardless of our particular religious or spiritual beliefs, we all have stories of failure and redemption. And what we do in 12-step recovery is tell those stories of failure and redemption, whether we are overtly religious or not. One psychologist says that he studied practices of confession for more than 7 years, and he has learned that these practices are found across diverse times and cultures. I mean, it is so widespread that obviously there is a human compulsion to confess. And what he and his colleagues learned is that this compulsion is profoundly healing, physically, psychologically, and spiritually. So this is coming from a secular psychologist, not a religious person. So the NA Big Book says that in step 5, we admit to our God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. We looked at our wrongs and examined our behavior patterns in the 4th step, and we started to peel back the layers of the onion. We started to see some of the deeper aspects of our disease, especially emotionally. And so now we get to sit down with another person and share our inventory out loud. And it is important that we believe in something greater than ourselves just to do the 4th step, and now to do the 5th. I need to know that my higher power is with me during that 5th step. For years, we avoided seeing ourselves as we really were. We were ashamed of ourselves and felt isolated from the rest of the world. Now that we have the shameful part of our past trapped, we can sweep it out of our lives if we face and admit it. It would be tragic to write it all down and then shove it in a drawer. As I mentioned yesterday, some sponsors have their sponsees shredded after they have shared it. Some will have them burn it. But the idea is that we're not carrying that around for the rest of our lives. The whole point of doing the 4th step is so that we can release the hold that all that shame, that all the memory of all that wrong stuff we did, so we can release the hold that it has on us, because it's hard to carry that stuff around. Very hard. It's painful. And when we are in pain, as addicts, what we do is look to relieve that pain. We want something that will make that pain go away. And that's what using is about. It is important that we choose carefully who we hear this step. It's important that we just don't tell everything to everybody. It's just not a good idea. As I said at the very beginning, in talking about disclosing our stories in a general way, I am sometimes amazed at the stuff that people share in the rooms. And I think, ooh, I would not be telling that in a public place, but that's just me. However, when it comes to this 12-step recovery, I needed to be able to trust somebody enough to hear my 5th step. And so I have always shared my 5th step with my sponsor, because if I couldn't trust her with this, why is she my sponsor? But I've also shared pieces of my 5th step with therapists along the way, because I mean, that's their job. Their job is to hear this stuff. And there are 1 or 2 things that I haven't even shared with my sponsor, that I have shared with my therapist. There is a different level. The truth is that we all have some things that we don't really want anybody to know about. And it is a good idea if we can get those things off of our chest, out of our souls, speak it with someone who is safe. There is no hard and fast rule about who hears our 5th step in 12-step recovery. Most people have it heard by their sponsor. Some people choose to go to a religious professional, like a minister. A lot of people like to go to Catholic priests, even if they are not Catholic, because they know that confession is part of the Catholic thing. And they also know that that person cannot share, cannot reveal what is shared in the confessional. And some people go to Catholic priests because they're good at hearing confession. They're good at this. They're good at hearing it. They're good at holding us in a sacred space. So whoever we choose, we need to choose carefully, and then we need to do it. Some of us have tried to hide a part of our past. in an attempt to find an easier way of dealing with our inner feelings. And that is a mistake. And it's a mistake we cannot afford. We cannot afford to pretend that these things did not happen. We cannot afford to stuff them because they will bubble up. They will come back to bite us in the backside. This step exposes our motives and our actions. It's also important to not procrastinate. We need to be exact. We need to tell the simple truth, cut and dried as quickly as possible. As I mentioned in the last session, there's always a danger that we will exaggerate what we did because we're grandiose and we just want to be, like if we're going to be sinners or if we're going to be wrong or whatever language you use, we want to go strong. We want to go big. So it is important that we not do that, and a sponsor can help us to dial some of that back. But it's also equally dangerous to minimize it or to rationalize it. Like, well, yeah, I did, but yeah. We still want to sound good. That's the thing. We still want to sound good. Even in recovery, we want to sound good. Addicts tend to live secret lives. And for a lot of years, I covered my low self-esteem by hiding behind phony images that I hope would fool people. And I did fool some people. That's the truth. We get good at it. We get good at the deception, the lying, the stealing, the deception, all of that. We get good at it. It was important to me to look good and appear confident on the outside so that maybe nobody would really know how shaky and insecure I was on the inside. The truth is, we all walk around in masks. We all do. All humans do. Nobody brings their whole 100% authentic self out into the street to let everybody see it, judge it, and take swipes at it. We do not. Even those of us who think that we are, pretty realistic, pretty real, all of that, and we may be. I strive to be, but there's still some kind of a mask. And for us as recovering people, the masks have to go. But we have got to learn how to show up as real. Again, we don't put everything out there. There are some things people don't need to know, but we need to learn to show up as real, as authentic. I shared in the last session that I learned at a very young age how to be who I thought other people wanted me to be. That was so ingrained in me. I had been practicing that behavior for so long that it was hard to let go. I had masks on my mask. I had all of these ways of being. I had all of these different personalities. If you had talked to 10 people who thought they knew me well and really got into the heart of it, they would have described to you 10 different people. There would have been some things that would have been in common, but then there would have been other things that would have made you think, have you ever sat at a funeral and wondered, who is the minister talking about? The masks have to go. And it takes great courage. It takes a lot of courage to start to peel back those masks. It's almost as if the old hard skin has to be peeled off. And then there's new skin underneath that. And it is tender. And we don't really want anybody to touch it. 12-step recovery is done in fellowship for a reason. We need people who will help us and support us and sometimes protect us. But we have to let people know who we are. And there are people for whom that is an easier process than others. There are people who have been in 12-step recovery for a long time who still struggle with it. But we began with how? Honest, open-minded, and willing. We must be as honest as we are capable of being, as open-minded as we are capable of being, and as willing. It comes back to that higher power, higher purpose, God of my understanding. In order to do any of this, I have got to believe, in my case, in a benevolent God who is not just waiting to zap me, who is not waiting to slay me, who is not waiting to punish me. I have got to believe in a benevolent higher power who is saying to me on a regular basis, who you are is wonderful. Who you are is good. I see the good in you. Now let others see the good in you. This is hard after years and years of living in isolation. And as I said before, even if it looks like we're around people, the addict is a person who lives in isolation. 90% of what is going on in our heads is about using. It's about getting it. It's about using it. It's about getting more. It's about having supply. So even when we are physically around people, we are isolated people. We feel like we don't fit in. We feel like we don't belong. And the disease has helped us to believe over the years that nobody really cares about us. They don't really like us. They don't really love us. They love somebody else more. I'm not the favorite child. I mean, there's so much noise going on in our heads. There's so much chaos going on in our souls. It's no wonder that we use. It's no wonder that we want to fire up those endorphins, that we want to get that good stuff going in our brains to make us feel better. As I've said before, if it was still working, I don't know if I would have found recovery again. But it wasn't working anymore. At some point, I needed to accept that this was no longer my solution. The truth is, it never was. It was a Band-Aid on the huge gaping wound of my soul. It never was the solution. And of course, at some point, it became the problem. It became what I had my employer say, if it's medical, see a doctor. If it's medical, get help. If it's medical, we will pay for it. We will help you, but get help. Thanks be to God that I got help and that I found people in 12-step recovery like me, people who were sharing things that I thought I would never share, things that I didn't even know other people were thinking and feeling. Here they were, my people, my tribe. It's hard for addicts to trust. And so if you are a person who has a loved one who is addicted, you may believe you are the most trustworthy person in the world. How could they not trust you? And you may be right, but that's not their perception. My perception of you isn't necessarily the truth about you, because remember, my brain is distorted from years of use, and my mind has been distorted because the addiction is threefold. It's physical, yes, but it is also mental and emotional. And that is why the big book of AA says that recovery is only possible when we have an entire psychic change. Working these 12 steps, spiritual recovery is about transformation, not about making us mildly better human beings. It's about transformation, about shedding all that old and taking on new a new way of being and living in the world using this blueprint for living called 12-step recovery. In step 6, we're going to talk about God's role in all of this.